Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. So I wanted to react to an interview that really left me speechless and even more bullish about Palantir than I usually am. And this interview was done by Shyam Sankar, the CTO of Palantir, with Tom Nash in his bathroom or something. You can see on the background, this is like a bathtub and a soap dispenser. I don't know where they did it, but other than this, it's fantastic production quality. Tom Nash asked really, really good questions. By the way, the link to the full video is in the description box below, and I really recommend that you watch the whole interview. I just really wanted to show some few highlights that made me very, very bullish about this company. So please make sure you're subscribed and let's go.
So people saying, well, what's going on with Palantir and they're anti-China? Like that was one point that people talked about. You mentioned earlier Airbus, and I think that was the inflection point for a lot of people to understand that Palantir is a two-headed monster. It's not just the government business. There's a lot of value in the commercial sector. Can you talk a little bit about what you can say, I don't know, about how the Airbus project happened and what you were able to do for that company? I think it's super important now, having seen what's going on with Boeing, because Boeing are not having, you know how they say a shooter is not having a good game? Boeing is not having a good career. They're not having a good career. 737, 8 MAX, now with this new plane.
So the reason why I think that this is very, very mind-blowing is because these two companies are like, South and North Korea. They're like the same thing. They're producing airplanes, and one of them is using Palantir Skywise, and one of them is not, and one of them is floundering, and one of them is doing really, really great. So this is a piece of Palantir history, and on top of it, this Skywise and this cooperation with Airbus was super pivotal for Palantir. So we're gonna hear the full story of what they did there, how the work came about, what efficiencies they had, and it's going to blow your mind.
Their business is completely going to shit, and they're losing trust. Mainly, I think, because they went from engineering hardcore to this MBA culture. Let's assemble. I
just wrote a blog post about something similar there on process.
They completely abandoned this engineering hardcore backbone, and they changed the culture. I think it stems from the McDonnell Douglas merger. That's where everything started to go to shit. But with Boeing having their turbulences, so to speak, the excellence of Airbus is very evident, right? So can you talk a little bit how the project happened and what you guys were able to learn from it?
It's some of the most exciting work that we've been a part of. So we started working with Airbus in the initial A350 ramp. So they had just built this new plane. They had just released it to the market. Tom Enders, the CEO at the time, had told Wall Street, told the markets, look, we expect to build 50 planes in the first year. And this is a really important launch because the A380 is an exquisite and beautiful plane, but it is structurally unprofitable, right? So
like the 747, it's the same thing. They don't work.
So then with the, they need this launch to go well. So in the first year of production, they had said, we're going to build 50 of these. They were on track to build 16. And so they started working with us to say, look, what can you do to fix the production ramp? And I think this is another really important aspect to it, which is like, we're not going in there with some tiny point solution saying we do this little aspect of quality or this little aspect of ERP. It's really, they had a problem to solve, which is I need to ship 50 planes. And now how do we help them decomp that problem into a series of things that we can help do? And we spent a bunch of time on the final assembly line in Toulouse and sub-assemblies and like Saint-Nazaire. And we started understanding what are the things that are slowing down the ability to produce these planes. So when you're first building something, you're going to have these non-conformities. Things don't go exactly according to plan. The question is this something that's part of the learning curve? Like, I didn't do it, I didn't put the bolt on right this time, but next time I know what to do. That problem goes away, versus it's an issue. It's a recurring non-conformity that's going to happen on every plane because it's a design challenge, it's a tooling challenge. There's something more structural to go figure out. And these are highly complex machines that are made across many factories. And so we were able to... Many countries, exactly.
Thousands of employees.
It's a complex coordination problem. Like you can work on certain parts of the plane, But if you're working on this part of the plane, then you actually can't work on that part of the plane. Then you have a complex supply chain to manage because all these parts exist in all these different places. So we tackled two problems in the beginning. One was quality. How do we address this issue of identifying root causes, figuring out what's a recurring nonconformity versus what is just part of the learning curve? And the second is then production optimization. So what work should I be doing today based on my view of the inventory that exists and the future production plan and the resources I have available? Sometimes people are coming from other factories to do this work. So we got them to 49. We didn't get them to 50, but we took them from a run rate of 16 to 49. And that's when they felt like, wow, we might have something in this technology. And actually, I'd say credit to Mark Fontaine and to Tom Enders, they really had the vision of what to do with this. So the very next thing they came up with is, wow, look, we've built this asset for our aircrafts that really can live from cradle to grave. We have the cradle part. We built them in Foundry. Now, how do we extend this data asset into service? So like now we're shipping these A350s to our customers. They're operating them. You know who knows how to operate A350s better than anyone? Us, Airbus. How do we extend our knowledge so that this asset...
To the customers.
How do we extend our knowledge into the customers so that they're getting the best uptime, the most revenue they possibly can from the assets they're buying from us, and use that to drive more growth in the services businesses that we provide them to take care of these planes, and use that to drive growth in selling more planes. And that was the birth of Skywise. So we just started working with a few airlines here or there, the first folks they had delivered the A350s to, but then we quickly scaled that to, I don't know, on the order of 160, 180 airlines now. It manages about 2/3 of the world's air fleet.
And then everybody who works with the airline is also on Skywise, all the suppliers and everything. Because I've been getting calls from people who are in the third and fourth tier, and they're like, "Yo, I'm a subcontractor of this and that airline, and ever since I've been on Skywise, I've become a Palantir investor because this thing blew my mind."
Well, that's one of the cool things. We've always talked about, okay, Foundry is this amazing platform to integrate your operations from the hand of your supplier to the hand of your customer. But why stop there? Why don't you go into your suppliers? Why don't you extend Foundry into their ERP, into their supplier's ERP? And what that does, it takes out a lot of the inefficiency of a lack of visibility and coordination problems where someone says something's going to show up, it doesn't show up. Yes, it's annoying that they didn't tell, but actually it's not, it's more than annoying. You had planned your production schedule assuming their parts were going to show up, but it's perfectly knowable it was never going to show up. And so how do we remove that human communication, make it machine communication, and everyone can be, you're kind of getting rid of some of the political drag of like, ooh, I don't want to tell them it's late or something, I'll fix it. And it's just flowing. You get the Kaizen. And then extending that into your customers is how you differentiate your service. If you really think about it, of course, when a plane door blows out, there is a difference between the two airplanes. But you wouldn't say that, if you're Airbus and you want to differentiate over time, how do I build a better plane? It's not by doing one or two things better. It's by doing 1,000 things better. How are you going to do 1,000 things better? Well, that's going to really come, it's data intensive. I have 50,000 sensors on these planes. They're generating data between 1 hertz and 1,000 hertz, 1 data point per second to 1,000 data points a second.
2 million data points per flight, per average flight.
That's right. So how do you absorb all of that to say, look, okay, in these sorts of conditions, we're doing really well on these humidities like this, and we're doing this sort of ascent and this sort of environment. We want to work with our suppliers to make a more reliable part. And so it's organizing yourselves around that problem so you can actually have a fundamentally transformative, better experience. And I think in part, Airbus's relentless focus on this kind of Kaizen of improving the experience is what's bearing out.
So that was some piece of Palantir news for you. And by the way, again, you can see it now, fantastic production quality. Shyam, to me, sounds like ChatGPT when he speaks on Palantir events. And he's really having a good, friendly conversation with Tom Nash that is easy to understand. It's in, non-nerd language. So I was blown away by what they did in Airbus. And I think it's very representative that in some industries that Palantir gets a foot in, they get like a total monopoly. And you hear that 2/3 of the world's planes fly using Palantir software. Healthcare seems to be a similar thing where they are just blowing up completely. And this is amazing. So now the next video is going to talk about Palantir's culture. And I became so bullish on this because, we know this as Palantir investors, but the way he says it, it's fantastic. And, you start understanding why some people think that they're consultancy. And I'm going to talk about it a bit in the end.
part of the thing you've guys been doing with countering that. When Michigan just won the Natty, the national championship, and they interviewed Jim Harbaugh, the coach, and they said, "Look, when people talk about you, don't get bitter, get better." Right? And I love that because you guys are not went down the path of, oh, that's annoying. You've started to re-educate the community, and you've started to do like the boot camps and the AIPs. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that was huge for you guys.
No, that's been hugely exciting. I mean, there's kind of a macro thing that we should get to at some point, which is just like the expectation people have of software, how that's translating into their view of SaaS, maybe some of the recent comments David Friedberg made on the All In podcast. But I
love that show.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun. Those guys are very smart. David Sachs is one of the early product mentors for many of us at Palantir. So the core thing with AIP is I think, I've talked extensively about how I think about LLMs, this sort of middle ground between human thought and algorithmic reasoning, and the nature, it's this stochastic technology. So how do you integrate this stochastic technology into a tool chain that was otherwise pretty deterministic? Well, that leads you to a place where you say, you got to play with it. That's number one thing, is you got to get human beings to sit down and actually use this, and use it ideally for some meaningful period of time. Because when you first use it, you can kind of over extrapolate and maybe misunderstand what this thing is capable of and not. And so we have just found it immensely clarifying to get our own engineers to sit down, play with this stuff. As an outgrowth of that, we realized, we should be externalizing this. We should take this boot camp concept from something that captivates our internal imagination to something that's going to help everyone understand what is this technology capable of. And then I think it allowed us to stand on the shoulders of essentially the 10 years of investments we've made around technologies like Foundry, build AIP on top of that, and deliver use cases in really a day or two. And having people see that. I mean, one of my favorite examples was a customer who'd been working with us for a while. They had a 4-month project with very big name software companies on generative AI. They had a board meeting coming up. The customer very reluctantly came to our boot camp. And after a few hours of the boot camp,
he did you a favor. He's like, okay, I'll come. Yeah,
exactly. After a few hours, pivoted their entire board meeting to be about what they were building in the boot camp, and threw away the four months of work because largely they'd gotten nothing done in 4 months. And so I think having this integrated tool chain. So this is where it goes back to the macro frame, which is, we have this disease in software broadly speaking, which is it's so optimized for what is easy to sell. And so that means, well, who's your buyer? Your buyer's IT. Okay, how do I sell a box that has some perception of white space, that has some incremental differentiation over the prior boxes? I'm going to design everything around that. It's really about a one and done sale. Instead of, I think, the more authentically valuable thing, which we've often got critique for, is working backwards from the customer's problem. Understanding what is going to matter to this business. Why should I be proud of the work I'm going to do? Hey, I got to help with the A350 ramp, right? Like that is the nature. That's the gnarly, complex, irreducible problem that's in front of you.
We haven't said the number, that 33%.
Yeah.
That's
improvement in
33% in production speed and same quality.
Yeah, improved quality.
Improved quality, yeah.
And there's so many second order benefits to that too. It's like you have reduced cost of supply chain. You're able to put instead of overnighting parts, you're able to put them on the slow boat, more efficiently manage all of that. It leads to more aircraft sales, which is really what moves the needle on the business there. But so by solving the complex problem, you're actually able to generate true value for the businesses, which is what gets them to invest more. And so we're kind of, when I hear David Friedberg talk about, look, I had an engineer rebuild this thing, you have all these consequences of this kind of SaaS drives you to something that's all beta, makes you look like everyone else, doesn't really fit you, and then is essentially extractionary in terms of how the pricing sort of works. Instead of thinking about it more authentically, like I need to own the problem, be a partner to my customer, deliver on that. The other benefit for us is it elucidates what's next. Like, okay, I'm able to solve all of this stuff today. How should I be thinking about my roadmap? Instead of sitting in Palo Alto and eating strawberries and thinking about big ideas, my roadmap is forged in the fires of the pain on the final assembly line of Toulouse, on the things that I can see are within grasp that we can't do today, but we'll be able to do tomorrow, and getting into that continuous product development cycle around these things.
So my mind was blown by this. Like one of them was this customer who reluctantly came to the AIP and how effective freaking AIP is. And then the second one is really, you can see here that Palantir is a one-of-a-kind company. I don't know of any company who does like them. So instead of them going from the viewpoint of what can we sell to customers, which is a lot of the complaining that goes on in Twitter, or used to go on Twitter about Palantir, that they suck at sales, they suck at this, they suck at that. Instead, they're like, how can we help this business? And there's a lot of benefits from this. Like, one of them is that they, like, once they succeed with the demos, they are, like, the businesses are 100% dependent on them. It's very hard to get off Palantir. And number two is they have no competitors. And number three is that because the product is made in the front lines, as he said, it's very easy for them to know where to go next with the product, because they know what problems their customers have. Like, think about it. When you use Google Analytics, it's a done and made program that solves a very niche case. And Google doesn't care if it solves your problem or not. It just looks at like how many people are using it, and they try to optimize on the most people using it, you know. And this is why I think that, for example, Microsoft with its fiber and, you know, many things that are said to be Palantir competitors, they're never going to make it, because Palantir is just so different. And here is the last part that I want to show you, similarly good.
I had this very interesting conversation with a guy who used to work for Tesla for BI, and it's like all this shit I can do with this and that and this and that. I said, okay, hold on a second. So I bring a CodeStrap Dorian into the conversation. I said, talk to him. After about 20 minutes, it's like, my mind is blown. I completely misunderstood this. Like, this is next level stuff. I think a lot of people haven't gone through this process. They just don't understand the little intricacies. And by the way, speaking of Tesla, and this is another point I want to make here. If you mentioned comfort in repeatability, right? So if you look at the auto industry and why Tesla had so much success, because they came in and said, guys, you've been doing the same thing for the past 40 years. You haven't changed jack shit. So they came up as the newcomer. They changed everything, the process. They threw everything out, the way they assemble vehicles, the way they build everything, right? No, sometimes they got a lot of things wrong, but they broke the mold.
Yeah.
I think you guys, can you talk about how you've done it for software, how you changed enterprise software in that sense?
Yeah, well, we really focused on, look, most people when they're trying to build software, the number one constraint is how financeable is my dream, right? Because if I can't raise money, it seems completely academic. And so the most financeable thing, particularly at this point in time in the Valley, was some sort of point solution, all SaaS. It's all multi-tenant. It's just, you know, targeting commercial. It's all sales driven, very low on the engineering side. And
this is more interesting than you think. So this is about why Palantir is not going to get a competitor anytime soon. And that's because of exactly this mentality that when you do a new startup, you have to, like, if you can't finance it, you can't make the startup, right? And what makes you be able to finance this product is that you can go to investors and say, like, look, these guys, every time they click on the emails, they mess this up. So I can make this program that helps them clicking on the emails, like super niche problem, and I can charge this. And then let's hire salespeople to push this on people. And it's completely wrong. It's not how Palantir is working. Palantir is like, okay, we're here. We're one of the best software engineer people. We know how to use AI. What do you want handled as a company? And it's just so different from anyone.
we flipped that around and we said, actually, I don't know how to sell this, but I have this vision. It's going to be engineering driven. We're going to solve the breadth of the problem. At every turn, when there's a chance to make something simpler and suitable for a more narrow market or more complex and double down on the ambition, we're going to double down. And certainly we have metabolized a huge amount of pain and continue to. Like that is it's not an easy path to take, but ultimately, you end up inventing the future. You end up going after the problems everyone else is structurally afraid of, either because they don't think they can raise money after it, or more likely it just seems too hard. And you're not solving for. So I think some of the critiques people have is like, okay, well, talk about your sales, talk about the process. I was like, well, we're not solving for that. First, we're solving for making this thing truly valuable. Yeah. And that means when Airbus needs you to fundamentally inflect production in less than 6 months, you can do that. I think a more honest accounting in some sense of when we started working with Airbus, it was more like 10 years of R&D plus 6 months. But then I think we were the only company in the world that could have done that. And then you build on that moat. When COVID comes around and you're trying to build operational warp speed from a dead start, we can build a biomanufacturing supply chain that spans clinical trials all the way to the pharmacy in 5 weeks. And so you just think about the scale of problem that you can have access to, the amount of societal impact that can have, and that's what's been driving the business. And I think it drives elite talent acquisition. Why do people
100%?
Why do people want to keep working at Palantir? Because the problems are the most interesting in the world, and the ability to inflect the direction of the world is very high accordingly.
Fantastic. So mind blown. I'm more bullish on Palantir than ever. And by the way, I forgot to say this in the beginning. The fact that they start to interact with retail investors is fantastic. We have been complaining about this on Palantir Weekly for so long. And I really think that Shyam or some other guy from Palantir needs to come on Emmett's channel or on Palantir Weekly. But this is a fantastic start. Tom Nash really did a fantastic interview. Link is in the description box. And if you watch this so far and you feel like you got value out of this, I have a Patreon link where I will be uploading my different stock analysis, and you can get access to me. And currently there's nothing really much there, so you would only support the channel, which I would be very happy for. It definitely helps on creating these videos. So if you want, please check it out and make sure you subscribe to the channel. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.